There are some major changes happening in the automotive world right now with the passing of the big, beautiful bill, the repealing of the EPA waiver, and we don't know what companies are going to survive and which ones are going to collapse. So that's what we're going to dig into real deep today. I'm Paul.
And I'm Lauren, and we're going to talk about the truth of the auto industry with no agenda. We're not getting paid by any brands. We're not getting paid by big oil. We're here to tell you the truth about the brands that are going to survive and which ones are going to die.
Yep, and these changes are having widespread effects. So we're going to go through every single manufacturer to talk to you about which ones we think are going to be the most heavily affected and how they're going to survive, especially where they currently are right now, because kind of understanding this position is going to heavily affect what cars you can buy moving forward, especially if you lease a new car every 3 years, or if you're investing in the markets, or if you work at a dealership and you want to know what to expect. All these things moving so quickly, especially with the tariff discussions and all the changes in manufacturing, millions, billions of dollars being moved between different manufacturing facilities. The passing of the big, beautiful bill and the repeal of the EPA waiver to California means that there's no longer a mandate or even just a pseudo mandate that says that you have to buy an electric car. And what that means is that it's essentially allowing the market to prove itself. Electric vehicle sales are not very big. They peaked at 8% in the last numbers that came out. And it's just proving that people aren't buying them. So when you hear us dig into why electric vehicles are not a good business plan, that's really what we're talking about here, is that the market just cannot sustain this type of vehicle that nobody wants to buy.
Okay, having with us today, we have a panel of experts. Anton Wahlman, he's a sell-side analyst and works in the financial world for decades, specializing in automotive and technology. Anton writes a column for Seeking Alpha, which is definitely worth subscribing to. Karl Brauer offers extensive experience, and we've known each other for decades in the auto industry, and he's an expert in automotive data, specializing in analysis, market trend reporting, automotive knowledge, and you can find Karl on iSee Cars as well as Karl Brauer Cars on YouTube. Welcome, guys.
Hey, great to be on with you, Lauren.
I should also qualify that there is approximately 100 days worth of electric vehicle inventory in the U.S. And that is, well, some brands thought ahead. Others, well, they're digging in their heels on all electric. And that's kind of where the winners and losers start. So let's go through the different brands. Anton, welcome to the show. Tell us what your thoughts are initially, and then we'll go into some of the brands.
Yeah, so all this stems from the passage last week of the big budget bill, the reconciliation bill in Congress signed by the president on July 4th. And it has two components that are pertinent to this discussion. One is the ending of the federal tax credit, $7,500 to qualified purchasers and lessees. That takes into effect on September 30th. By far, the bigger impact to the industry is the ending of the so-called EV mandate. In other words, the fines that the automakers have to pay on a federal level in order to, basically meet the quota of the total fleet mix that they're selling into the market. So the 7,500 is a known figure. Everybody's talking about it. But the impact of the other part is less discussed and less known because the economics around it are not as explicit. The automakers aren't really telling you what they're doing behind the scenes to achieve that formula, because their penalties are in the many, many, many thousands of dollars on the federal level alone. And in order to meet that, they either have to buy credits from somebody who's got credits to sell, and that's normally just the EV makers, and by far the largest one is Tesla, or they can just sell more EVs. Well, how do they sell more EVs? Well, they have to price them below market because the dog isn't eating the dog food. I mean, if they were to charge for an EV the cost plus the same margins that they would have on their average gasoline vehicles that they've had in their portfolios for a century, those vehicles would be far more expensive. They would cost whatever they're selling into the market today for $39,000 might be $79,000. And of course, then they wouldn't sell as many. So they're taking a bath on all of those models. So that is going away immediately. And as a result, from an accounting perspective, all the automakers right now, their cost structure for their average gasoline vehicle fell now by several $1,000s per car, which means that they can price them lower. So what is clear is what is going to happen on an all other things equal basis with the gasoline cars. They're going to fall in price. But it's not as clear in the short run, and a very short run, meaning within the next year or so, is what is going to happen with EV pricing. Because in the short run, they have all of these inventories of EVs still on the books, and they have production schedules and models that are launching now and for the next year or so that had been planned since 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so there's an overhang. I mean, you can't like stop this oil tanker and turn it around on a dime. This was going to take roughly, in my opinion, and I guess roughly almost about 2 years for them to adjust their production schedules and take down the model output and so forth. So for the next year or two, I think we can still assume that they're going to have to keep EV pricing rather low because they had no choice. They got to dump the product. Think of this as a one-time going out of business sale. That's effectively what it is. They're reducing their footprint in front of the consumer. Fewer models, fewer units, and that oil tanker is taking a couple of years to slow down. Once we get to the end of that process in a couple of years, EV pricing is going to go up dramatically because there's no reason to subsidize these cars internally anymore. Cost $75,000 to make this guy. Hey, we're going to sell it for $85,000. We're not going to sell it for $35,000. That's how it's going to go. And during that time, in the beginning, they're going to sell a lot more gasoline cars because they're going to be priced lower, and the sale of EVs are going to drop off sharply over the next 2 or 3 years. That's the thesis.
I agree with you, Anton. Karl, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what Anton says, and I think what we all have to be expecting and ready for and being able to see through is look at this, look how much EV sales are up right when they're killing them and all. See, we shouldn't have killed EV sales. Look how many more people are buying them, because everyone who's on the fence about buying an EV knows the $7,500 credit's going away. Manufacturers want to clear them out. Dealers want to clear them out before the $7,500 credit goes away because, like Anton says, they're not going to sell any once it does. So there's going to be a ramp up in EVs for the next 2 to 3 months in terms of volume. And you'll have certain components of our population and political spectrum saying, look at this, sales are growing and now they're going to kill them. It's ridiculous.
We're already starting to see that amongst other automotive journalists. But the interesting thing about the four of us is we have no agenda. We're not like aligned with a certain brand or paid by a certain brand or paid by a certain outlet. Right. Or oil companies. I get accused of that all the time, but it's not true. Send a check. But I haven't got that. But so the interesting thing is we're going to be allowed to say whatever we want about each brand and then have to worry about, who's paying us or what outlet we work with because we're all independent. So I'd like to look at some of the brands and if they're going to sink or swim, in your opinion. We'll start off with, this is a big one, Audi. So Anton, what's your thoughts on the future of Audi?
Yeah, so of course, the only thing that's happening in this world, in the automotive world, is not just the whole EV transition or end of tax credits or end of the EV mandate. There are other things happening. So Audi is a good example of that. Audi does not manufacture any cars inside the United States. They have one factory in Mexico where they make the Q5. So their issue right now is just as big as just this whole tariff thing, which is an entirely different topic. I don't think we're going to get into that here. But, Audi, of course, made a big commitment years ago that they were going to, of course, become an all-electric brand like so many others did. The language over the last 18 or so months has softened quite dramatically. Everybody, almost every brand, is now saying that, we're still going to be selling non-EVs after 2030, after 2032, maybe even after 2035. So this is a moving target. At some point, these companies are going to respond to where the market is going. And if the U.S. market specifically is not going to be consuming many EVs, which is very clear at this point, then Audi, just to satisfy the demand for Audis in the U.S., will have to make plenty of gasoline versions of their vehicles over the next foreseeable future.
Karl, you just drove 2 of the Audi brands. Tell us what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I drove the Q5 and the SQ5, the performance version of their best-selling vehicle in the U.S., their compact SUV, one of the best, most competitive high-volume categories in the U.S. And I drove the A5 and the S5, the sedan that used to be the best-selling category for a lot of these companies, like the 3 Series and the E-Class or the C-Class. But Now the SUVs are taking over, and both of them were really good. Audi has just made increasingly appealing product for the last really like 30 years, but even the last 10 years, they kept getting better on the internal combustion side. And their EVs are fine by EV standards and how they go, but as we've noted, they're not making money on them. They're losing money, and they're not selling at an increasingly high rate. And it just seemed bizarre when all these brands were saying, we're going to be all EV, we're going to be all EV. Yeah, everyone is really annoyed and bummed and depressed when they see us dropping the internal combustion versions of these vehicles, but we have to go all EV. That's the future, so that's where we're going. And thankfully, the language is softened, and we've also seen a lot of prioritizing and reinvesting in product plan, especially in the last even 3 or 4 months. So reality is, as I like to say, you can love reality or you can hate reality, but you ignore reality at your own peril.
You know, it's interesting. JD Power just had their Audi numbers, and the lowest ranked car, which used to be the benchmark, was Audi. I was actually surprised. They ranked below Jaguar everything. So, I mean, any input on that?
Yeah, I don't know why that they've lost some of that ranking, but I mean, like I said, the newest ones I was in, the interior material quality was fabulous. The interface was good. The handling, everything about them was really solid. But I don't know. I'd have to dig into those. I'd be curious to know if they're mechanical issues or dealership experiences. You know, I mean, I remember 2.5 decades ago, Porsche started to slide off the front, and we found out it's because they hadn't put cup holders in their cars yet. They were being hammered for that. So JD Power's we won't get into that either, but they're an interesting. I'll use the word interesting. We always know that interesting could mean anything. JD Power's an interesting benchmark for measuring quality, but that's another topic.
Right. And you do a lot of analysis with iSee cars, and you can check that out on their website. Carl's always putting out good content. The next brand is BMW and Mini, because they're the same company that also includes Rolls, but most people aren't buying Rolls Royces. And they're always, of course, they can build whatever they want. They're going to sell them. But what's your thoughts on BMW and Mini, Anton?
Well, BMW is in a somewhat fortunate position of being, among the Germans anyway, of having the largest percentage of their output, both in measured in units as well as in dollar value, made on U.S. soil. So they're certainly also being helped from this whole tariff perspective, is that their largest SUVs, the X7 and the X5 and the X4 and X3, and maybe I'm missing one or two, are made in South Carolina. So they're a step ahead of the others. And of course, all of those vehicles are solidly internal combustion engine based. And of course, you can get them all with a plug-in hybrid. They're in a pretty good position from this standpoint in the context of the issue that we are talking about today, which is to say the changing U.S. market. They can sell their best center of market and upscale products. They're all, I mean, they're just sitting there like they're like the lion sitting in the middle of all of the friendly little helpless animals here. I mean, they can really just eat from all sides of the coin here. So I would say that BMW, as a relative matter, is a clear beneficiary in the short to, well, frankly, intermediate and long run, especially when you compare it with some of the other German automakers. Mercedes is probably right behind them.
Right. BMW is the largest employer in the whole state of South Carolina. So they're doing something right. Minis are still made in the UK. Carl, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so a lot of the same things. And it's important that, we bring up where these vehicles are made, because this is kind of specific to the U.S. We know that a lot of other countries, we're seeing some stalling in EV demand in Europe and even in China. But it's not kind of, I shouldn't say stalling, I should say it's slowing down the growth. But it had totally plateaued in the U.S. and was looking to retract or contract even before the incentives go away, and even before the change in the administration in January, or the election in November. We were seeing the growth in the EV sales in the U.S. starting to peter out. So this market is not friendly to EVs without a bunch of government help, and now the government help is going to go away too. And what does that mean? That means good news and bad news for automakers. Good news is higher profit internal combustion vehicles are going to be selling really well here. That we're not going to have all these weird non-natural forces trying to get us out of internal combustion into EVs in the US. That means you can sell cars in the US and make money on them, because you're going to sell mostly internal combustion cars, and those are still profitable. The bad news is if they're not based in the U.S. and building them in the U.S., there are now tariffs, and those are going to hammer you. So as Anton says, probably the single most important feature or characteristic of any automaker, no matter which country their headquarters is located in, is how much of their production is located in North America, or specifically within the U.S. borders. And BMW has an advantage there over a lot of the other Europeans.
That's actually a great lead in to the next one, which is Ford and Lincoln, because their production's split up all over the place, and they are kind of one of those quintessential American companies. So where do we see them going?
Well, so the Ford and Lincoln situation, I mean, clearly, I mean, they are so heavily focused in terms of their profits on the North American market. At least in the short run, the White House has made clear that the USMCA produced vehicles in both Canada and Mexico are going to be exempt from all of these tariffs, at least for the near term. We'll see what happens with that longer term, but at least for the moment, it seems like at a minimum they're going to get some relief, but in the short term, it's actually zero. So whether the car is made in Mexico, as in the case with the aforementioned Audi Q5 that we talked about a few minutes ago or not, it's okay for now. So Ford, I mean, look, they are, I mean, they're in a terrific position because they never went so extremely high on the hog on the pure EVs to begin with. They took, the F-150, which was such a natural spot to try out something, right? I mean, it was the same frame. I mean, it was like a low risk proposition for them to put a BEV, battery electric vehicle version of the F-150. The Mustang, okay, it's never made any profits for them, but it was an okay toe in the water for them. And after that, it kind of came to just about nothing. They got the big panel van that you can have as like some sort of Amazon UPS delivery vehicle, perfectly fine again. So Ford has actually taken, in my opinion, one of the most sensible approaches that people were harping on them 2, 3, 4 years ago. Oh, GM is so ahead of you or whatever. Look, at the end of the day, Ford won this. They wasted less money than GM in particular, and now they come out smelling like a rose. So I view Ford as one of the clear and obvious winners in what had just happened here with this new legislation from Washington that ends the EV mandate.
Karl, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, basically the same. What's interesting with Ford and some of the other companies that we're still going to talk about is the amount of investment they put into China. A lot of these domestic automakers, based in North America, were thinking that was going to be their gravy train for an indefinite period. Was look at this exploding China market, and we're going to have manufacturing there, and look how well it's going to work. Well, you have to partner with Chinese companies to build in China, and I think anyone who's not trying to creatively package this or creatively describe it, like me, would just say, what happened? Chinese forced foreign companies to teach them how to build really good cars for about 20 years. China got it figured out. Now China doesn't need their help anymore, and they're doing everything they can to kill the success of foreign companies that are operating in their borders because they don't need them anymore, and they'd like to have their home product doing well. And that's exactly what's happening. So Ford is well positioned, as Anton says, as a result of this legislation and change in administration in the U.S., but they were one of the heavy investors in China and had high hopes for China. GM is the other one. We're going to get to them, I know. And they're not going to have probably nearly the success they thought they were going to have in China.
Ford's also been really slow to deliver a lot of EVs in comparison to a lot of the other brands. Do you think that that's one of the main reasons why, like, even though they said, hey, we're going all EV, the future is EV, they've said it many, many times over, even when they were putting out a 760 horsepower Mustang and now a 800 something horsepower Mustang, and they're still saying we're going all EV, but they're not showing that. Do you think that their slow roll on that is part of the main reason why they're going to survive going through this?
Yeah, Anton, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the Ford is one of those cases where there was a bit of double speak, and you have to look a little bit more at what they actually did as opposed to what they said. And I think that in terms of actual physical execution out the door, their movements were a little bit more guarded. And I think that now it turns out to have served them rather well, because they are now able to handle this abrupt shift in the U.S. market with lesser sort of sunk costs and launch costs than some of the others. I mean, they hit the brakes earlier, and they were a little bit, they had like their foot just a tiny bit on the brake already, a little bit earlier ahead of the curve. And I think that certainly helps them at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. And the other thing I would throw in there, and again, we gotta get to, I'm chomping at the bit to talk about GM because we're next one. Yeah. Well, so let me just, because there's a good crossover here, because if you're talking about Ford, it makes sense to talk about GM for some reason. It's almost like those two are related somehow.
Almost.
They're the big players in the U.S. And as a good compare contrast, right? Ford was less aggressive on the move toward EVs, and they were more dedicated to continuing their work on hybrids and plug-in hybrids. And GM was the opposite. It was all EVs all the time. We're not going to waste money on this half-measure hybrid thing. And now hybrids are looking like a really smart way to go. And when we get to Toyota, we can really dive into this, but hybrids are looking like the very smart way to go, plug-in hybrids particularly, and EVs are looking, at least in this market, like not the way to go. And because Ford was more moderate and more balanced in their approach, they're going to do much better going forward. And they don't have to dig themselves out of a position that they dug themselves into like GM. But let's jump into GM.
Karl,
But since you were talking about that, sorry, Paul, Canada, by the way, and this is a factor to consider, Canada sort of follows the U.S. They have 100% tariff on all Chinese cars coming in, so they're living off of whatever we produce. So they're basically like a sister country, and don't go me go down that road. But the thought is they're now easing their EV mandate because there's not going to be any product. So when you get to General Motors, Paul, you can go through the list of all the sub companies that we're talking. So it's all under the same roof.
Oh goodness, yeah. Well, the number is smaller than it used to be, but it's General Motors, which is Chevrolet, GMC, and Cadillac. Karl, since you're so eager to jump in, go ahead.
Yeah, well, GM, I just feel like it's really unfortunate that there's this joke about GM finally getting a vehicle right and then killing it. That's like this 40-year joke. And I hate that joke mostly because it keeps happening and we can keep making the joke. I wish the joke would go away, but GM keeps making the joke possible for decades, like most of my lifetime. And that's a really scary amount of time at this point. So they've done it like 10 times before, and this was probably the worst one. And it was a little vehicle, Anton owned one, so he knows even more about them, called the Volt. Okay, and this was at the time called a range extender. It wasn't a hybrid. It was a range extender because the Prius had been out for 8 or 10 years before the Volt came out, whatever. And so then the Volt comes out, and they're saying that it's an electric car with a range extender. Okay, that was early. That was late aughts or early teens, whatever version of plug-in hybrid. Bottom line is GM had the plug-in hybrid first, and everyone I know who owned a Volt loved it. Maybe they didn't sell really well. Maybe the Volt wasn't ever close to their best-selling vehicle, but it, like a lot of really valuable vehicles and nameplates in the history of the automobile, it was a passionate nameplate in that people who owned it were passionate about it, just like Prius people. Okay, Prius was not the best-selling car initially at all, but it had a real following, and it was ahead of the game when it came out, and so was the Volt. And General Motors could have and should have continued to play off of that car's innovation and being ahead of the curve and the small but always growing passionate following. And instead, and the second generation one was even better. Like the first generation one was kind of goofy looking, I'll be honest. It wasn't really a very attractive car, but it totally functional and worked. Like most of the alternative energy cars in the 2000s, none of them were very attractive. The first Prius wasn't exactly beautiful. The second Volt looked good. Like it had a cool design. I remember when I first saw it, I was like, wow, this is a car I'd almost buy just because I like the looks of it before you get into the whole drivetrain technology. So they'd really done a good job with the Volt and with the plug-in hybrid technology, and they could have so easily spread that across the rest of their massive General Motors, product line that goes through these 4 brands. Nah, hybrids are half measure. It's all EVs all the time. We're going all in. And now it's all about hybrids and plug-in hybrids. EVs are not looking like the smart way to go. GM has to stop the oil tanker, as Anton properly described it, on all the efforts and energy that have been put into making EVs, and they have to refire the oil tanker that's been in dry dock for years and get it back onto the ocean and start getting it to do runs for them, which is going to take a lot of time. And all in the meantime, Ford, even more so Toyota, the Koreans, Hyundai, Kia, all of them full steam ahead. So how many billions did GM lose on that bad decision? We'll never know because we don't have a DeLorean. We can't go try a different timeline, but it's a lot.
But they're still all in on it. They're still all in on these EVs because Mary Barra's coming out and saying, no, EVs are still the future. And at the same time, investing in the Tonawanda plant, not far from us, millions and millions of dollars. So they I don't think know what they want to do. I think that they're probably in meetings as we speak, trying to figure out how to retool everything and adjust for the future. It's going to take a couple of years, like Anton was saying.
Yeah, so I think what's going on here is that they know very well what they need to do. I mean, all the lobbyists in Washington have told them what's happened. I mean, they're aware of all of this stuff. There's a little bit of pride going on there. They jumped into the pool so naked that it was absolutely disgusting, right? So now they have to say, how do we end this movie before anybody notices? So they know that their shift in terms of product output is going to not show until we're into calendar 2027 in any meaningful way. They made a decision over a full calendar year ago that they were going to introduce hybrids and so forth. Going back to the Volt again, I mean, everybody who loved it, loved it because, we bought it as a little bit of just a ploy, right? We just, it was fun to goof around, tried new technology, and it was a wonderful technology. It didn't sell well because it was a straight four-seater. Who buys a straight four-seater? You couldn't fit a fifth person. They just put this thing in an Equinox body, would have sold a decimal or 2 point more, no problem. But, the marketing department at GM sometimes, I mean, look, if you put these people in charge of marketing funeral parlors, people would stop dying. I mean, it was just such an obvious thing, and they missed it. Okay, totally. So they can't figure this thing. So now there's no huge benefit for them to start screaming from the rooftops that, we made a huge mistake on this pure BEV stuff. And we're going to launch these hybrids in 18 to 24 months from now and across the board. And for that matter, non-hybrid, just basic 5.3 liter V8s all over. We're going to bring back the lineup with the land yachts from 1969 and all the good stuff. They're not going to say that today because the cars aren't ready yet. So now they're biding their time. They're using euphemistic language. They're going to say, well, we'll adjust to market conditions, all this other stuff. The plan is being set in motion. It started already 15, 18 months ago. We'll start seeing it in 2027. We'll start seeing it in announcements toward the fall of next year, fall of 2026, with some early showings and early, call it whatever you want, previews of what's to come. And then these will roll out in 27, 28, and the full model changeover will not have occurred until 2029, when they will be on a heavy ICE focus up and down the line. There'll be a bunch of hybrids. There'll be some plug-in hybrids. And yes, they will still have a handful of BEVs because at this point, I mean, they're kind of the boats in the water anyway. I mean, they're not going to just kill them for the sake of killing them. They're going to update them a little bit. They're going to put them on let's call it a low reinvestment cycle, right? Where they're all set. They'll update them, get a new color, adds a little detail here and there. Then that's fine. But other than that, we're going to see, a lot more pickup trucks with a lot more V8s, a lot more large sedans and SUVs. I mean, there'll be all of this good stuff.
It's funny. Currently, their term that they're using is, we will coexist. And that came from Mark Royce. That we were at an event, and I asked him, I said, you guys can do hybrids? And he's like, oh, no, it's gas or electric. We're not doing hybrids after we know otherwise. So I said, really? And he used the line that I'm sure some PR person gave him. We're going to coexist. So I posted it on social media, and he wrote back as a comment, get over it. And I'm thinking, that's not what you said when I talked to you personally. All right, next on our hit parade is Honda and Acura. They're doing some good stuff, and they've already said they're going to bring some production back to Indiana, which is good as well. So, Carl, what's your thoughts on Honda and Acura?
Well, I feel like they were not as far along in their commitment to EVs. So unlike, say, Ford, where they could have gone in heavier, more in the GM mode, but they didn't because they, I think, were thinking about it. I think Honda just didn't have the ability to as aggressively go into EVs, and lucky for them. So they certainly, language-wise, they seemed as committed as GM, and it's all EVs all the time. It's all about EVs, and they've still been, even fairly recently, it's still shockingly, it surprised me how much they're committed to that. I think Honda's got a history of being a very capable engineering company and likes to see themselves as innovative, and they've been very innovative in a lot of ways in the auto industry for the past 50 plus years. And I think they've decided this is the way we get innovative. We turn our engineering might into the ultimate electric vehicle company. That was the sense I got from their language. But they hadn't gone much down that road, at least not publicly. Who knows how much they've spent behind the scenes. But now they can reorient themselves a little bit, and it's not going to be as public of a mea culpa as GM theoretically should be making. But as Anton said, they're going to creatively avoid actually saying that or trying to appear that way. Honda will rightfully and wisely steer back toward actually, they don't even have to do anything new. If they just go and start producing a lot of what they've already produced, they are an engine company. They're a fabulous engine company. And I thought it was tragic that they were going to become an all EV company. They were one of the, a lot of companies, they got nothing to lose. We talked about Mini, right? And there's some others and all. It's like, if you're a brand that's notice all the brands that were first to commit to going all EV, the ones that were hardly selling any internal combustion. It's like, yeah, it's really easy for Mini to say we're an all EV company when your market share is down and you're not selling very many non-EVs or any kind of car. But Honda sold a lot of internal combustion powered vehicles over the last 50 years, and they made some of the best internal combustion engines. And I hope they continue to do that, and at least for this market. And thankfully, they didn't already, go overboard on going all EV.
Yeah, Honda, partnership. Go ahead, Anton.
Honda, is an engine company first. I mean, whether it's lawn mowers or other garden tools or whatever. I mean, snow blowers. That's what they make. They make an engine, and then they make stuff around the engine. I mean, Honda at this point, Carl is exactly right. I mean, it's like the little old story about the little boy and the Zen master. It all depends on where you end the story. So got this little boy, right, who breaks both of his legs, and the whole village gathers around and says, "Oh my God, poor boy, he broke both of his legs. I'm sorry, his life is ruined." Next year a war breaks out and all the boys are sent off to war and all the other boys die. So, he was very lucky to break both of his legs. So Honda, in this case, they basically were late to EVs, and they hardly had time to launch any. They had some absolute joke worth of CRAP that came out a few years ago with like 80 miles of range or whatever. No serious person bought them. But I mean, they never got their toe in the water, so they never got bit by the crocodile. So I mean, they can just produce whatever, all the Civics and the Passports and the CFR. They don't need to do anything. Keep on doing what you're doing. I mean, they have no wounds, no wounds.
Yeah, they got very lucky.
I think one company that we missed on General Motors is Hummer.
Oh,
and I just want to.
Well, that's GMC now.
Right, but is Hummer going to stay or go? What's your thoughts, Anton?
Well, the product is already launched, so they have no incentive to just kill it tomorrow. I mean, they just won't get any new investment for this stuff. I mean, who's going to buy it? But that thing is 9,500 pounds. I mean, its battery weighs more than 10 other vehicles that are sold at the bottom end of the market. That I think the battery weighs like roughly 3,000 pounds on this thing. I mean, it's $112,000. I mean, hello. So the answer is it's going to just simply see reduced investment because the demand for these things are going to be nothing. So the production will sort of bleed out, and they will put those dollars into cranking up a bunch of 5.3 liter V8s that they're going to stick into everything. For all I know, the Chevy Caprice is coming back. For all I know, we're going to have a new taxi cab in New York City. So that's where it stands. So yeah, it'll survive because they don't make money by killing it tomorrow, but 3, 4, 5 years from now, could be gone.
Carl, what got that number?
Well, and I think they're a good sneak preview. What has gone on with Hummer in the last 3 years since they revived the brand is a good preview of what it sounds like is going to happen to Cadillac, right? Which is, this is a big bad premium brand, and we're going to stick with EVs. Cadillac was supposed to be all EV, and we're going that. We've got all these ick cars, and that's what I call them, the ick cars. But that's probably not what GM or Cadillac wanted me to call those things. But so all those icky cars from Cadillac, they'll keep making them, and they'll commit to going all electric. But kind of like Mini versus BMW, right? It's like, okay, this will be our electric division. We won't sell very many cars. None of them will be profitable. They'll have no contribution to the total company's financial bottom line. But philosophically, we can always say, when someone says, how come you aren't doing more? And we all know this is how it works, right? It's like when all the scrum of press is there screaming at them in a year or two, where's your EV investment? Look how many more Suburbans and Tahoes and Yukons you're selling with big V8s compared to 2 years ago. They're going to say Cadillac is 100% EV. We have a 100% EV division. They won't say that makes us no money and we sell like 18 a year, but that's what they'll be able to point to. So that's what Cadillac and Hummer will do.
One important aspect of Cadillac is to realize that after GM sold off its Opel brand in 2017 to the Peugeot group, they, which is now of course part of Stellantis, they didn't have a presence at all in the European market. And the way they got back in, and when I say get back in, they're so far to the right of the decimal point that the numbers are, if I told you they're laughable, they don't even deserve to be called laughable. I mean, they're tiny, but they're there. And they're spending money on marketing, and you see the big labels in the big cities in Europe. And I mean, they don't have any numbers to show for them, but they're there. And it's important, I think, for us to enter also into this discussion. What will this decision that was made in Washington, D.C. just barely a week ago mean in terms of what will happen in terms of the European legislation? Because after all, that's another 30% of the world market, right? Yeah. The European world, in terms of units, they're 15 million units a year, same as the U.S. market. And we have not seen very big moves yet. We got one tangible change in the European legislation, which is that the automakers got essentially to pool 2025, 26, and 27 in terms of their EV mandates. And hey, you can skip a year, meaning they'll all skip 2025, which is the current one, if you make it up in 26 and 27. Now, of course, they're all going to come and cry like little babies come Christmas this year and saying, oh, yeah, we couldn't make it in 25 and we can't make it in 26 either. You got to give us another year. And we'll just have to see in terms of at some point, the European legislators must come up with some more permanent way of saying, look, what this stuff that we came up with 4, 5, 6 years ago just isn't working. We need to not just give companies a 1 year reprieve and keep postponing. We got to give them some sort of new longer term runway here that sets the rules similar to what the U.S. just did. Will they go as far as what was done in Congress and by the president last week? I have no idea. But I mean, I think we're going to see some movement in that direction. But there's a big gap here between, what could happen and on that side and what could happen over here. That, I think until we have that, there's a lot of room of uncertainty for Europe. And we know the general direction of where the chessboard will be tilting, but we don't know how much and how fast.
I think one of the smartest companies out there, and they've proven themselves, is Hyundai Corporation, which is Hyundai, Genesis, and Kia. Not just the product, the benchmark that they've created for other brands to reach that level, but the fact that they made everything like a Lego. Like, do you want electric? Do you want the hybrid? Do you want gas? We'll build it. And diesel in other countries. What's your thoughts, Karl, on the Hyundai group of all three? Because they all kind of are kissing cousins,
One of the most well-run, one of the best, most accomplished automotive groups on the planet. Certainly that are sold here. There's all sorts of crazy things I'm hearing and seeing going on in China in the last 5 years. So I think we're like the story, like the Zen story from Anton. We're not at the end here yet. But right now, today, in the U.S. in 2025, if you ask me what global automotive group that you have experience with in the U.S. is the most impressive, it'd be the Hyundai Motor Group by a pretty wide margin. And I think exactly what you said, Lauren. I remember I realized this about 15 years ago that maybe 18 years ago that Toyota, the reason Toyota was so successful was that no matter what was going on in the world, they could point to what was in their product line and have an answer. Okay. Gas prices low, people buying giant SUVs. We've got Tundras and Sequoias and Land Cruisers. Okay. Gas prices spike. There's an economic contraction, 2008 recession. We've got Corollas and fuel efficient Camrys and this car you might have heard of that Leo DiCaprio and all the stars like called a Prius. Mm-hmm. So they had a story for every political moment in the history and every economic cycle and everywhere in the economic cycle. That's now Hyundai and Kia. They have wisely followed Toyota's lead, and they've got a wide range of product. And then there's a second part to doing that too, because once upon a time, various other automakers that are a little closer to where we are talking right now had a wide range of vehicles. They were all good too. They were well executed products. So they didn't just have a wide range of products, but every one of them within the categories those products were supposed to compete were one of the best ones. And with Hyundai Kia specifically, they were usually the least expensive ones too, which is never a bad thing. When you're making competitive product that costs less than all your competitors, that usually translates to good sales and growth. And, I look at Hyundai Kia and I think, man, if you're one of some of these other players out there, Mitsubishi, Mazda, some of these Nissan. Premium brands. Yeah, Nissan, some of these premium brands have been around, Infiniti, Acura. And then you look at Genesis, if you're a premium brand that's been around for 20, 30, 40 years, or you look at mainstream brands, Hyundai and Kia, and you're a mainstream brand that's been around for 20, 30, 50, 60 years in this country, must be a little frustrating because these guys have passed a bunch of you by and they just keep growing. So that's my general opinion. And then just specifically, yes, they've got electric vehicles. And even if you're not an electric vehicle buyer like I am, every time I drive their electric vehicle product, I'm like, if I was buying an electric vehicle, I'd probably buy one of these, whatever I'm in at the time, the Ioniq 9 or the Kia, the K9, what is it? I'm forgetting theirs. I'm getting them all confused up. The big 3-row SUV from Kia.
The EV6 also is great.
Yeah, the EV9, the Ioniq 9, the EV6, the Ioniq 5, all of their kind of, sister vehicles across those two brands are really well executed on the EV side. And then I love the modular thing that you said where you've got like, how many versions of a Sportage? You got a pure gas, you got a plug-in hybrid, you got a regular hybrid. This is how you have an option for every automaker. And if you're efficient in how you structure the cars modularly, like you said, Lauren, you're making money on all of them.
I think the hero is Jose Munez. I really do. I mean, smart guy, came from Nissan, was there when the Carlos Ghosn nightmare happened, and super smart of Hyundai. They've been, I'd say stealing, but they've been hiring really great talent from the Germans, and they used it all, and they put it together so smartly. Sorry, Anton, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I couldn't agree more with Karl. I mean, I think that they've just executed so well. I mean, look at these interiors and the designs. Again, they just don't make many mistakes. However, there's one thing though that is inescapable. If you go to Vegas and you put a chip on every single square, I mean, there's a penalty, right? So you have so much, if you bet on everything, then if something doesn't work out, you're going to have to pay a little bit. So they have come out and they have in their immediate product pipeline so many BEVs for the North American market now. That is one area where they, just like others that have planned for so many models, so many nameplates coming out in the last year or two, looking a year or two into the future, that they're going to have to take a little bath on that too. So, that is the penalty that you pay for that strategy. But I think that in the broader context of the Hyundai Group with Kia and Genesis have executed so supremely on just like every metric. Otherwise, they can sort of afford to take that haircut a little bit. So I see them in a position where at the end of the day here, they'll end up very much on the right side, even if there's going to be a bit of a write-off in terms of their BEVs for the North American market in the short run here.
Yeah, and real quick, what I would throw in also, Anton, is a lot of that investment they did included investment in North American production. So they may not end up building nearly as many Ioniq 9s at their new plant outside Savannah, Georgia, as they originally invested in and thought they were going to produce, but they can produce Sportages there, and they can produce, Tucson's there, and they can produce other things there. So I feel like they'll just, if anyone's good, and all, I've known guys, I know an engineer, I know a guy who worked at Toyota 10 years as an engineer, and then he worked at Hyundai for another like 10 plus years. And he had very interesting stories on compare contrast. And among the things that he was happy to acknowledge was that much more nimble. Hyundai super nimble, he said almost to a schizophrenic level. Like, something's wrong with a Toyota, they get feedback and all. It's a typical big corporation that's very, prudent in their movement to fix and address that. Like the afternoon that they get feedback from a single dealer or customer saying they don't like something about this thing in this car, they're like at the plant saying, okay, change how that is built.
And they built a steel plant. They're building a steel plant in Louisiana. But their timing was fantastic. Trump says, that's it. Everyone's getting tariffs. They go, oh, we're bringing in $31 billion or whatever. Their number was huge to put in a steel plant, expand the plant in Birmingham, Alabama, expand the plant in West Point, Georgia. And we're building batteries here. It's like, wow, they were heroes. So
and I'll give you just a quick sort of case study that falls within the Hyundai Kia group that really shows the essence of what we're talking about here. And that is that, when the EV mandate goes away on a percentage basis, as a percentage of the price of the vehicle, the biggest beneficiary are going to be the cheapest, most basic gasoline cars, because they're the ones that as a percentage of the total price paid by the consumer have been saddled by the accounting costs of these EV mandates, because, they just, there's a certain baseline cost to the whole equation, and that hits the cheapest ones. The very cheapest SUV that you can buy in the U.S. market that I believe is the Kia Seltos is $23,000 for the base one for the 25 model year. $23,000 you get like an actual sort of SUV. It's not made in North America. The ones we're getting are made in Korea. The car is also made in India. Now, to Karl's point, in that factory down in Georgia, what can they put in? Well, this would be a terrific time to move a vehicle in that is not going to be saddled by any of these EV mandate costs, and that is perfectly tailored for the tastes of the North American market, where previously this thing was, this is the kind of car that potentially could be selling for several thousands of dollars less if they moved the production to the U.S., which was not really in the cards before. But thanks to this change in the legislation that occurred on July 4th, this could be a perfect moment for them to just grab gobbles and gobbles of market share by making the least expensive, credible SUV even less expensive for the U.S. market. They could just rake it home.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think that's what the market, everybody says, every car I review, isn't there a car below $20,000? We need that. And we haven't seen that. And then the last one was with the Nissan Versa. And then they go, we're not going to make it anymore. I'm like, let's get to a more fun product line. Land Rover Jaguar. Go ahead, Karl.
I can feel the heat rising in the room.
Yeah, talk about going all in when you shouldn't have on something that you shouldn't have gone all in on. It's fascinating to look at those two brands, because one is a long-standing pure SUV brand, and one is pretty much a long-standing pure automobile non-SUV brand. And they were starting to make some SUVs with Jaguar nameplates on them because that's where the market was going. But it just never really caught on for all the various reasons. The Jaguar SUVs, I think they were good sellers by Jaguar standards, but certainly not by industry SUV standards. And so Land Rover has benefited big time from the ongoing shift to SUVs, and Jaguar has not. And they kind of threw a Hail Mary in terms of remaking the brand, I guess would be the nice way to say it. Recently,
they fired their PR agency.
Yeah, and it didn't go well on so many levels. And if there was, you don't want to feel like that was the stake in the vampire that was struggling in the coffin to finish it off, but that wasn't a good move. So I don't know what the future for Jaguar holds, and it's really unfortunate because as a historic brand, style, performance, premium desirability and all. There's a lot of brands that would kill to have the brand equity that Jaguar once upon a time had. And I don't know how much of that equity is left. And I don't know how much investment will come from the Indians that control that brand to try to keep it going.
Once upon a time is a great way to put that, because they have actively said that they do not care about their current user base, and they don't care about, they're going after a totally new market. The history is gone. Scrap everything.
Yeah. Anton, what's your thoughts on Land Rover Jaguar?
Well, the tale of two worlds, right? I mean, we all see that there are plenty of Land Rover Defenders that are doing well. The Land Rover Defender is a very credible product. It's a kind of a design that it's, for what it's worth, I happen to like it a lot. But either way, whether you like it or not, it absolutely stands out. It's a very nicely chiseled product. Made in the Slovak Republic only. It's not made anywhere else in the world. So they got that to deal with for what it's worth. But, I see that, Jaguar, I mean, at the end of the day, what's under the skin, I mean, how could they possibly differentiate in the new world what's under the skin? They're going to have to make an extraordinary statement on design, which is possible. Because in this new world, I mean, that's like design is going to be the thing that sets you apart. But we don't know what's coming from them. And if they've said that all these designs are going to be based on pure battery electric vehicle foundations with no possibility for any internal combustion engine, then, well, they better scrap that idea if they're going to survive. So I mean, we're talking about so many years worth of a multi-year process here that, I mean, this thing is dead for a long while. Meanwhile, they're just going to have to live off the Land Rover side of this family.
Yeah,
I wonder if the F-type molds still in their possession. Can they refire that? I mean,
that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, seriously, right, Paul? I mean, talk about like a recent model. I remember the first time I drove the F-type, give or take 10 years ago, and I was 12 years ago, and I was like, wow, I would have never thought that I would consider a viable 911 alternative to have a Jaguar brand, badge on it. And that F-type, when it first hit, the sound it made and everything, the look, and it's all gone now.
Yep. All right. Next brand, Lauren.
Mazda, which I loved the RX-7. I had one back in the 80s. They're not going to come back with rotary, I don't think, but maybe an RX-7, but I still love the little Miata. So they never went electric. They tried. I think that was during COVID.
They tried one electric car 3 years ago, and they took it off the market immediately.
Look, it was like such a ridiculous compliance car effort that it was just so, I mean, it had no redeemable quality. It was ugly, hello.
Yeah.
And the range was, like a moped, I mean, it was horrible. So, but, Mazda still have to have that beautiful red color, and they're generally speaking, their exterior designs are very, very good. And now that their best-selling model, of course, the CX-5, they just showcased it the other day, finally I've gone away from this rotary connector, which, in theory sounds good, but in practice just doesn't work because the dog isn't eating the dog food. And now they've gone back to a 15.6-inch screen of all things that looks, touch, Google built in, all the good stuff. So, the product, I mean, look, this is very solid stuff, but it's just hard to differentiate. I mean, Toyota has a big technology and even an investment partnership with Mazda. So I say the muddling around, but when you're the smaller brand, I mean, you're always up to against the scale economies or lack thereof. So they have the joint venture production facility down in Alabama or whatever it is with Toyota, but that's just one product line. They have one, but the CX-50 that they make down there, they have a factory in Mexico. So they have challenges, but I sort of feel for them because the product is generally solid, and their latest step here. I mean, clearly is in the right direction, and they also don't have many of that EV investment baggage. So I really hope that they pull through.
And then now we moved up. Carl, I'm sorry, I didn't say anything on Mazda, and then we'll go to the next brand.
No, I would echo everything that Anton said, and I would say that generally speaking, Mazda is one of those brands that I almost felt was a little just underappreciated. I feel like they had great driving dynamics, good design, solid drivetrains. There was nothing wrong with Mazda. But again, someone like Hyundai and Kia, these brands have come out of nowhere relative to Mazda's history and just shot past them and all. So again, sometimes you can't just make a good car or an appealing car. You have to rise above the noise. Like Anton said, the differentiation. And as much as they tried, they had their Zoom
Remember that
advertising theme and all. Yeah,
That's great.
Which I think kind of worked and stuff like that. And the Miata is a one of a kind. It's a one-off vehicle that you can't get from any other brand, and it's very cool. But it's these guys aren't growing by leaps and bounds every year in sales like the Koreans are. It's just unfortunate for them.
Mercedes-Benz, that's a big one, built in the USA in Birmingham, Alabama, but some of it is not. And their drivelines definitely come from Germany. I just had a GLE coupe. Wow, super impressive car. All this electrification, though, just scares the heck out of me. Do you think Mercedes-Benz is going to sink or swim? Anton?
They'll do all right. I mean, this is Mercedes has, one of the advantages they have on a global basis. They're truly a global brand, right? I mean, they make going back to the time when all of us, or some of us anyway, were born in the prehistoric age. They launch one model, like the E-Class, for example. It's truly a global car. I mean, every car company have always talked about, we're going to make like the global car. It's going to be available. Mercedes is one of those. They made the car like the E-Class, and it was sold in the middle of Nowhereville, Africa, to somewhere in Malaysia. It was sold in Argentina, in the U.S., Europe. It was the same car. So they have a little bit of an easier time, right? When they come out with something, it tends to be a global car. I've always felt that about Mercedes, is they have a bit of a natural advantage. So I think that they'll be able to weather the storm from that standpoint. Their problem is, like all of these other German car companies, they've got a home market and a home government that has been so hostile to their activities worldwide that they've had this ball and chain with their home unions and their home market where they turn off the nukes, raise gasoline prices. My God, I mean, can they, how much more can they sabotage their own home industry? So, there's a lot of mixed factors when it comes to Mercedes, but I sense that their management now, I mean, they seem pretty competent. I mean, the CEO is on the ball, I would have to say. And I think he knows what's got to get done. So I have to say I'm ever so mildly optimistic that they're a mix of properties worldwide is going to make it work out. And of course, they had that one factor, is that they're one step behind, half step or a third of a step behind BMW. They got that huge facility down in Alabama where they stamp out many of the large SUVs and so forth, not to the same extent as BMW, but as I said, a fraction of a step behind.
Carl, what's your thoughts on Mercedes-Benz?
Well, I'll talk about a powerful brand, right? I mean, yeah, because of their global presence and their history of producing amazing luxury vehicles. I don't know if there is a more powerful or valuable automotive brand on the planet than Mercedes-Benz. And well-deserved, too. I always call him Vault. He's like sitting in a bank vault. When you sit in those cars, they just feel so well constructed. And I think what's fascinating to me about Mercedes-Benz is that, BMW was like the driver's car with, pretty good build quality and luxury. And Mercedes was the really great luxury build quality car with okay driving dynamics. That was 30, 40 years ago. They've really addressed the driving. Like, you drive modern Mercedes and they are very dynamic and fun to drive. And I feel like they've encroached further into the ultimate driving machine realm that BMW wanted to own than BMW has encroached into the, amazing quality of build and bank vault impression that Mercedes still owns. They've just added the driving fun as well. So I consider them one of the more successful brands over the last 20 years in terms of how they've evolved. I was not at all happy with all these EQ models. for all the same reasons. I
Well,
wasn't
gone, it looks like. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish they hadn't. I felt they went too aggressive there. A lot of the Europeans, I think they had forces on them that made them even more so than the domestics feel like they had to run down that road, and Mercedes did. But everything from their design to even the interface inside and stuff, I just wasn't a big fan of the EQs, any of them. And I'm glad that at least in the US, there won't be a reason for them to keep building those. And hopefully they'll keep doing really cool AMG V8 powered vehicles.
Well, from very successful brands like Mercedes-Benz to Nissan, Infiniti, and Mitsubishi, I honestly fear for the brand. I mean, shutting down factories, laying people off. I mean, they're asking for extended terms for their suppliers. I'm thinking, how far is it out now when you're asking to extend the terms? I don't know if Nissan's going to make it. And they were going to do a deal with Honda. That blew up. So what do you think's going to happen now, Anton?
Well, I think they've been thrown a little bit of a lifeline here for the U.S. market, right? In terms of they had that Leaf, which was going away and being replaced by something far more interesting, and they had that Aria, which is, I guess, barely selling. But now they don't have to lose any money on that. They have to reinvest any more in that, and the rest of their lineup is, again, near the bottom end of the market where the Rogue and so forth resides, and maybe something smaller than that. They can now cut the prices on them because they won't be saddled by these enormous EV mandate fines, right? So these cars that may have had a base price of $28,000, now they'll be $22,000. I mean, so to some extent, this is a classical case of, they just had a pot of gold being dropped into their lap a little bit. So that'll help them at least in the U.S. market. Of course, they got other issues, again, in Asia and in Europe, but all other things equal, this will help them in the U.S. market. So, and now keep in mind, too, at the bottom end, they were going to get rid of the Versa, right? So all of these small models, this goes for all the automakers, they've been taking away the smallest Kia, the Rio, the smallest Hyundai, the Accent, the smallest Ford, the EcoSport. All of these things disappeared from the U.S. market because of the stupid EV mandates and the cost that they would impose on the smallest vehicles. Guess what? They can now bring them back. So, there was, back in 2019, we had vehicles in the U.S. market that cost $16,000, right? Now, and that was with some of these costs involved. All of these models and even lower than them can come back into the market. Fast forward 3 to 4 years from now, we could have a renaissance in the U.S. market where really, really cheap, basic, plain vanilla gasoline vehicles, it doesn't matter what shape, they could be small pickup trucks, could be small crossovers, whatever it is, they can flood the market and we could have a total renaissance in terms of affordability for the U.S. market. And Nissan is going to get their pound of flesh here because they have these models around the world. GM and Ford, they killed so many of them. They have a harder time bringing them in quickly. Nissan is one of those guys, together with Hyundai, together with Toyota, that could either Toyota killed the Yaris, whatever. But, these at 13, 14 grand, they could start selling them in the U.S. market anymore where they had to kill them before.
Carl, you have anything to add on that? Are you good?
Yeah, we want turnaround, and we've seen some crazy turnarounds in the auto industry. But I think what you were saying, Lauren, is this will be somewhat miraculous, maybe one of the biggest turnarounds in an automotive industry history if Nissan can pull themselves back out of kind of terminally ill status like they're in right now. And I agree with Anton. Things got much better for them in the U.S. as a result of the big beautiful bill and the loss of these EPA mandates. But that's they need a lot of help. They really need to, and they're trying to be like the third, fourth. You got Mazda, you got Honda, you got Toyota, you got Nissan. It's just starting to seem like maybe there's not enough room on the planet. So this planet ain't big enough for the four of us. I don't know. So let's see.
Yeah.
All right. Up next is Porsche, who has at one point said they're going all EV, and they're kind of pulling back a little bit here and there. They're talking about putting the hybrid back into the Macan. They have actually officially killed the 718 Cayman and Boxster, which is a real shame. But they might reverse course on that at some point. At least they're not going with an electric 911. So let's talk about Porsche, Anton.
Look, this is a classical case of they got at some point not to try to be something that they haven't been seen as being. So, look, they just reverse course, more ICEs, wait for the Europeans to change their laws. That's all we can hope for.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm getting a Boxster in a few weeks, and I haven't been in one in a while, or I came in, and I'm doing the whole, farewell story and stuff. And of course, when I was saying that, the Porsche people were like, well, remember, it's not going away. It's just, we're going to a different, version. We're going to go to an electric version and all. And it was just hard for me not to be like, yeah, I know that means it's going away.
Right. And the three of us,
This is like
the three of us have Porsches too. I do, Paul does, and Carl does. It's like, you're killing us.
Yes. Yes.
All right, let's look at the next brand, which is Stellantis, which includes Alfa Romeo, and there's a story there, Chrysler, Dodge, Fiat, Jeep, Maserati, and Ram. I think I got them all.
Oh, the ones that are in the U.S., yeah.
Yeah, in the U.S. We won't even go down the whole Peugeot line. Anton, any thoughts on the future of Stellantis? I know Carl and I are going to be on the same page with the answer on this one.
The new management in the U.S., right? You got Tim Kuniskis, who sort of has his finger on the pulse of the actual consumer. Hello, for a change, right? So, look, I'm not worried about Stellantis in the U.S. market. I think that they know what to be done here. They're going to come out with a new mid-sized truck. They're going to build that in Illinois, and for all I know, they'll put a Hemi nap on a standard. Wouldn't that be something, right? It's like, it's like, forget about it. I mean, wouldn't that be a break? Wouldn't this be a way to sort of celebrate, the new golden age, right? We put a standard engine in the new mid-sized truck. Will be the 5.7-liter Hemi, and, welcome to America, you people. So that's the way to do it, and I'm not worried about them. But keep in mind that the majority of that company is still so heavily European-centric, where they have roughly, for all I know, it's 40 different brands, so Lancia, whatever, all of these brands, right? So that are hugely important for them, and they're so dependent on what the government is going to decide over there. That's going to be the subject of a whole separate debate that we're not going to have right here on today. But for the U.S., I think they're locked and loaded now.
Carl?
Well, if we needed proof of how brilliant Marconi was and how non-brilliant Tavares was, we have it now, right? Okay. Both these guys were non-native U.S. Citizens, didn't grow up in this country, and yet one of them so clearly understood the U.S. market and the U.S. consumer and funded brands and products that played to them. And, again, if we want to go back to J.D. Power for a second, when Dodge was getting first place on the J.D. Power quality survey for a couple of years there, if that isn't a sign of a massive turnaround, I don't know what is. All under Tim Kuniskis, as Anton noted, who's fairly brilliant when it comes to knowing what the U.S. buyer wants. Now, you couldn't get more American than Tim. So with him repositioned, pulling him out of retirement and putting him back not just in the company, but in a position to really run things was brilliant. Thankfully, someone on the other side of the Atlantic at least recognized that potential brilliant move and did it. And as Anton said, I think in this country, Stellantis will have, the world is its oyster. The political and regulatory environment has now been reset to a position that benefits exactly what brands like Dodge and Ram and Jeep can do. And hopefully they will. With Tim Kuniskis there, I'm confident they will. What that means globally, in Europe, and all the other places that Stellantis is trying to be successful is a whole other ball of wax that's too much to get into here. But the U.S. brands, under the proper control of a U.S. citizen who knows how to make them great and already was doing that in the past, they're gonna be full speed ahead.
Do we think that that they're going to sell off the parts of Stellantis to try to save the individual companies? Or are we looking at just maintenance mode, essentially, as Tim tries to turn things around in the markets where he actually can do something like how Anton mentioned the new Hemi trucks that are already selling out before they even hit the market?
Yeah, I think if they have to do that, Paul, that would be fine. They've got a lot of brands. Yeah, maybe too many in today's world. Again, it's kind of like Nissan, right? I just feel like, consolidation on so many levels, cost structure and everything else, sometimes it's just not worth it to have some brands around. The world just doesn't need as many brands, especially with the Chinese coming in and sucking up so much market share in general. So if Stellantis wants to, kind of like what it did, again, under Marconi, when it was FCA, when it was Fiat Chrysler, and it's basically like, look, we're a global, big air quotes, automaker and producer. but U.S. is where we make all our money. Right? If Stellantis can recognize what already happened and how that company already succeeded by doing that and does again, great. That's what they should do.
Right.
Okay. One thing I think is I'm watching 3 brands that have awesome product that sell horribly in the U.S., which is Alfa Romeo, Fiat, and Maserati. My guess is they're going to pull them from the U.S. and they're going to keep them in Europe where they belong because they just don't sell here. And I love them all. And I'm a huge fan of Alfa Romeo, but when they dumped their performance line in Quadrifoglio, I was like, it's another car. The Hornet is the same thing as Tonale. Stop trying to just relabel the cars. And I think that's going to be something that's a factor. But with Tim Kuniskis in charge, he keeps saying Americans count cylinders, and you're going to see that for a fact. Let's move on to the next brand. I've got a bunch of brands here, but I do want to hit this one. This is a big one, and I know Anton's going to have something to say on this. Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid. Do they survive or die?
Well, as a purely economic matter, in terms of their car business and the car business actual economics, they're, by far and away the biggest loser here because the EV market is going to shrink very rapidly. They're not going to be able to sell any credits for the purposes of the U.S. market and eventually not for other markets either, but at least for now, their credit intake, which is in the several hundreds of dollars, millions of dollars per quarter, that's going to be gone, and they're going to be facing competition from way cheaper plain vanilla gasoline vehicles. I mean, this is plague and cholera combined for them. So they are toast in the U.S. market in terms of their trajectory. Sales are falling and margins are falling, and the other companies, they just don't have the scale. So they have they were already subscale. So all those companies, as far as I'm concerned, you can kind of zero them out economically.
Even Tesla, wow.
And the only thing I would, well, the only thing I'd throw in there that just further emphasizes what Anton says, I know he knows this, but just to make it clear, China, right? I mean, if you're an EV producer and you're heavily based in the U.S. and the U.S. just changed the policies to make it not help you much, and you think, well, we're an EV producer, what are our global options? Your global options are to compete with China on the electric vehicle scale. So let me know how that works for you. So they're in big trouble for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Now, we have to talk about a big one, which is Toyota Lexus. We talked a little about it, but I think Toyota is very smart, and they pushed back. They took a ton of heat for saying, no, we're not going to do the all-electric thing. So what do you think, Anton? Are they winners or losers?
Toyota?
Yeah, Toyota Lexus.
Yeah, look, I mean, Toyota was always, but they were very open about it, right? They said up front that, unlike some others, they were tiptoeing and they were saying one thing and doing another. Toyota actually basically said what they were going to do, and there was very little daylight between what they said and the actions that they took. So I'm not worried about Toyota at all. I think that Toyota just is facing tough competition in general, as everybody will do. And the big question for Toyota is, in a world in which you have absolutely no benefit from a regulatory perspective of even doing hybrids, will hybrids be even as important? Will the consumer, I know we find hybrids interesting and we see some benefits, but the average consumer, if the average consumer is faced with the real cost of X number of thousands of dollars extra when purchasing a vehicle to buy a hybrid or non-hybrid, what will they really choose? So that's going to be Toyota's biggest challenges in this radically reshaped market. If you're buying a Corolla, will you buy the basic Corolla or the Corolla hybrid? If they're going to have to price that to the full cost of the true extra marginal cost of the hybrid, like some number that is bigger than what is on the sticker today, like it's $3,000. Will they actually pay the $3,000? But the good news for Toyota is they can make it without the hybrid. So at that point, they launched the Camry and a few other models in the last 2-3 years only as a hybrid. They can always switch that back to make it the regular 4-cylinder non-hybrid and take $3,000 out of the bill of materials. So Toyota will be fine. Not worried about them. They're good.
Yeah, Karl, what's your thoughts on Toyota Lexus? I know you mentioned it earlier.
Toyota is my favorite story in the industry. because of what Anton said, because they didn't kowtow. They didn't bow down to either political or governmental pressure. And I mean, I think you guys have heard me say this ad nauseum in our various discussions, but it's a story I love to tell, which was being part of the press scrums, having the meetings with Toyota, whether it was a press launch or an auto show launch, and watching all of our colleagues, big air quotes around that word, but watching all of our colleagues tisk them. Where's your EVs? Where's your EVs? Where's your EVs? And watching Toyota look them right back in the eye. And they weren't quite this blunt. I wish they would have been. It would have been great. But they basically said, not quite this blunt. We're not going to waste money on a bad business model. Why would you ask us to make a bad business decision? That's essentially what they said. They would say things like, well, we're going to invest where we think it makes sense. We're going to listen to our customer. They were very properly diplomatic about their response, but they still, if you dug through the language, they were basically saying, we don't believe in investing in bad business models, which are crazy. Can you imagine, Lauren, a car company that doesn't invest in bad business models? Whoa, talk about a brilliant, it's like, yeah, how come Toyota is the only one brilliant enough to A, think that way, and B, tell everyone, like Anton says, we're not even going to pretend. We're just going to tell you what we think here. And I loved watching various people tisk them and then claim they were wrong and yell about that and stuff like that. It's great. There's nothing like being able to say a good "I told you so." And boy,
I know, I love it.
Toyota could smack everyone across the face with the force of their "I told you so" right now today.
Right now, the last three a package together, which is Subaru, Volkswagen, and Volvo. They've all been through the same thing, testing electric cars, not selling well, having massive issues like Volkswagen. And Volkswagen's got a lot of pressure because they screwed up on Dieselgate. And it's a darn shame. Paul and I both own diesel Cayennes. We love them. We're not getting rid of them. But what's interesting to look at the bigger picture is Subaru still today, as we're doing this recording, showing a brand new electric car. And I'm like, what are you doing? And Volvo, which is also kind of sort of Polestar, same thing is going on. And so the question is, Anton, what's your thoughts on these smaller companies? Well, Volkswagen isn't small, but Subaru, VW, and Volvo.
That they're still all in on EV, yeah.
Yeah, so first of all, Volvo, Volvo is Chinese company now, of course, since so many years ago. And their management seems to believe that basically the world is going all EV. And they, I don't know, so far as of, very recently here, they haven't just understood what happened just in the U.S. market. So I think Volvo has to have a major moment here. And they may very well, but it hasn't happened as of today. The new CEO, which is after coming in from retirement here, having left the company a couple of years ago, doesn't seem to be getting the message yet. So that's a big story there. Volkswagen. Good news for Volkswagen is they have everything in-house. They have all the technologies. The problem for Volkswagen is that they execute so slowly. I mean, my goodness, does it take basically 50 years to develop a new model? So, it's almost like they have everything, but they don't know how to put it together quickly. And Subaru, again, partner with Toyota. I'm not too worried about Subaru. They'll take the cue from Toyota and all of these things that we're seeing with the new EVs now. This was baked 2, 3, 4 years ago. So, this is a bit of an unfortunate timing, I think, for Subaru. And I think that the Daddy Toyota here is basically going to come in and set them straight. So this was really a case of just unfortunate timing because this stuff was baked and they just happened to have these launches happening the moment that we just held the funeral, right? So that's where it is.
Karl, you have any thoughts on Volkswagen, Subaru, and Volvo, even though they're showing us electric cars?
Yeah, I mean, it was just on the Polestar event like you were. So we're watching another electric vehicle launch as the reason to buy them in the U.S. market at least goes away. And now comes a Subaru preview in New York. I think in the Subaru's case, just like Anton says, at this point, they're kind of sort of becoming a division of Toyota. So if Toyota's okay, Subaru's okay. And the good thing is, kind of like Stellantis and Dodge specifically, Subaru's made a lot of progress. Talk about a success story over the last 20 years in general. Subaru is much better. Oh my gosh. And so if they're allowed to go back to what they were doing for the last 2 decades and not be saddled with EV regulations and requirements, they should be just like Dodge is going to be now going forward versus the last couple of years. So I would hope Subaru also just takes off and everything's great for them. Volvo, and Polestar, I guess they're part of a big giant corporate entity. So on some level, maybe they'll be okay no matter what. But certainly in the U.S., I just don't see how Polestar is a pure EV company and Volvo, who's heavily going EV, don't have to do some retracing.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Paul, for pulling all the stuff together. This was a great conversation, and
Absolutely.
I think we'll have to follow up on this as we find new regulatory changes on the horizon. Again, this is not the last move on the chessboard in the history of the world. So as European legislation changes in the coming months and years, we'll have to definitely do it again and for other reasons as well. So thank you all, and we'll see you soon again.
Thanks, Anton.
Thank you, Anton. We'll see Anton. Anton is Seeking Alpha. And Karl, we can find you at iSee Cars and Karl Brauer Cars on YouTube.
And we'll have all the links down below in the description.
Yes. We'll link.
Fabulous.
I'd like to thank Anton Wahlman, who writes for Seeking Alpha, worth subscribing, and Karl Brauer's Karl Brauer Cars. Also, you can find his analysis on iSee Cars. The important part about our conversation, our panel discussion, is you're getting different perspectives from people that are not just auto journalists, but that cover the analysis and what this means for you, the brands you own, the brands you might buy, who's going to survive, and who may not.
Yeah. So if you want to follow more about what we do and also check out our guests, all the links are going to be down in the description below. You can follow me on Instagram at PaulFix3.
And I'm everywhere at Lauren Fix. Of course, all the news is right here on Car Coach Reports. And if you're looking for car reviews, they're on Car Smarts. If you have any thoughts on future segments for our podcast, put them down in the comments below. We appreciate your support. If you'd like to support us, you can buy us a cup of coffee. All the links are in the description. Thanks so much for watching.
See you next time.